Hi, my name's Jean-Luc Martel. I'm a Canadian citizen and currently living in Hamilton, where I have Hamilton, Canada, because it's easy to get confused with the other Hamiltons. And when the COVID lockdown happened, I knew it was going to be a watershed moment for the whole for our way of life, as human beings, but more specifically for the way of life of, shall we say, certain types of conditions that could no longer be allowed to stand. Now, what happens when you combine a very well-timed global pandemic with governments that are clearly based on cronyism, how much money you've got, more often than not what your skin color is, and and basic elitism, and where most of the work is done by the people who make the least amount for their efforts, and the people who do the least amount of work are the ones who are at the top 1% of the food chain. Those are the people that elect the government, not the voter. The voters don't fucking matter in democracy, at least not the capitalist conception of a democracy. They're irrelevant. What matters in capitalism is, well, the capitalist, and the capitalist is the person who does the least amount of work and builds their wealth on the back of the underpaid workers. Those are the people actually doing the work in the factories, in the shops, in the businesses, everywhere really. And for those of you who think I'm only talking about workers below a certain pay grade, I'm not. I'm talking about literally anybody who makes income that makes the capitalists the top 1% income. So if you think that I'm exempting you as a laborer simply because you're a high-flying secretary that has a really nice desk in an ivory tower somewhere, if you're working for somebody else for your salary or whatever, you're not a capitalist. If you're not self-employed, and by self-employed, I'm not talking small business here. I'm talking if you're not self-employed. In other words, you have complete, and by this term self-employed, I mean complete, total, absolute monetary freedom, to the point where your monetary freedom is completely dependent on everybody else not having the ability to spend money on what they see fit, as they see fit, on having their basic needs taken care of by a government that actually gives a shit instead of pretending and giving empty false promises, because that government is run by, this shouldn't surprise anybody right now, especially with what's going on in the States, and Canada as well, the whole Western world really, but especially the States and Canada. Point being is, it's the people with the money that have the votes, the power, and everything else. Or at least that's what was. But this new normal that people keep talking about, it's got nothing to do with COVID. COVID was just one of those opportunities that comes around every 100 years, if then, that sparks massive social changes and can never be gone back on. COVID-19, in terms of the threat it represents to human life, has been massively overplayed. And people are on to that bullshit. The real problem with COVID is the assholes taking advantage of the situation to create fear, division, and hatred between people within their countries and also other nations. And yes, I'm very much referring to all the United States or Canada or any other country, really, you know. And yes, I'm including China and Russia and any other country, you know, because, you know, this thing has very much been, you know, everybody doing it to everybody. But I will qualify that by stating that the United States is by far the worst of the lot, of a bad lot. By far. They're the most blatantly hypocritical of the bunch. Okay? Canada isn't much better off. I should know. I live in Canada. I actually pay attention to things that are going on around me. I have got, and full disclosure here, I've got high-functioning autism, aka Asperger's, and the first thing that I usually hear when the word Asperger's is people are like, "Oh, you mean like that kid did the mass shooting in the States?" Who, by the way, that kid did not have Asperger's. So that is, as Donald Trump loves to farcically tweet, that is hashtag fake news. Yes, and that was a bit of a tribute to one of my favorite YouTubers right now, which is the Tonight Show. I'm loving his take on the whole situation. And he does a really good job of towing a very fine line between parody and not taking it seriously, and not taking a very serious issue seriously. And he's doing a really good job of staying in between the two. Anyways, so the new normal after COVID is going to be this. Capitalism's dead, or it's dying. It's officially in its last days. Capitalism is going to be hashtag I can't breathe. That was it. Capitalism signed its death warrant with the I cannot breathe, I can't breathe protests. And this is not a sudden explosion. This is something that has been going on in the history of humanity for basically, or more specifically, in the modern context, for basically the last 200 years of Western imperialism. And a large part of Western imperialism has been the white majority population lying to themselves and convincing themselves that they are not the bad guys. I don't consider myself a bad guy. But that's because I don't close my eyes and refuse to see what's going on right in front of my face. Now, people who do close their eyes refuse to see what's going on right in front of their face, as I think the vast majority of people have done. I've certainly seen no shortage of people in my life who have looked the other way or attacked me personally, and people I care about personally, because they refuse to look away. One thing I've learned, the only thing useful I learned in the school system in Canada was that the school system is not designed to teach you anything that will improve your life or you as a human being. It is designed to denigrate you, grind you down, and turn you into a mindless cog in a machine. And that machine is called capitalism, and it runs on the cogs called workers, which is everybody else, basically, who's not in that 10%. And your skin color, your race, your heritage, whatever that bullshit, it is not relevant. Not anymore. Not really. If the protests have shown anything, in fact, it's that the divides only exist because the capitalist ruling class want them to. Because when people are divided, they can't get together on an issue that's important, like President Trump being completely out of control, like the U.S. System being completely out of control, like democracy being a farce and always being a farce for like the last 200 years. And I do mean all forms currently of Western democracy in every country. They're a joke for the overwhelmingly large part. There's a few countries that are doing it right, like Norway, Sweden, but they're by far in the minority. The vast majority of Western European countries or American countries have just used democracy and your freedom or my freedom, you know, and all that jazz. That's just been bullshit propaganda. Okay? The American Revolution was never about my freedom. They didn't even get the date wrong, actually. They got the date wrong. I was watching a rather good video about this. The Cynical Historian on YouTube. Check him out. It's really good. Pulling apart the American Revolution and just how revolutionary was it really. And it turns out that it was revolutionary, yeah, but not for the reason that the history books want you to believe. And he points out that they even got the date wrong. The American Revolution did not happen on the 4th. It happened on the 2nd, so there you go. They even got that bit wrong. You know, and when you can't get your basic date wrong, then it's safe to assume that everything else is probably wrong as well. But be that as it may. Get back to my original point. The new normal is going to be workers now know without any doubt whatsoever that there is in fact power for the people. Because we've seen it. Protests all over the world. Some people think it's about that one poor man who was literally strangled to death over 9 minutes by a police officer, who then, like every other murdering bastard before him, was not brought to justice. At least not until the whole country basically blew up. But this was just the latest in a very long string of events. Nothing new under the sun. This is just the latest in a very long string of events that have led up to exactly this point. This is a crisis point. And it's basically, there's only two kinds of people that are going to be left after this, essentially. There's going to be the people who who can admit to themselves that capitalism is a failed system. It was never intended to work for the benefit of the majority. It was always intended to be for the benefit of the vast minority, the people that held the wealth, the power, the properties, all that shit. So basically, unless you're a die-hard right-wing conservative or left, or basically, unless you're a die-hard who completely is incapable of just opening a fucking Twitter account and looking on the front page and seeing what's going on hour by hour, minute by minute, and seeing the pure viciousness of Trump and the people that support him. This is what democracy really looks like when you take away the facade of freedom and rights and all that bullshit, because it really is just a bunch of bullshit that people were sold. And now that people are exercising those rights for the first time really for the first time in basically since the mass protests in the 70s and the 60s. Because after those protests, the capitalists realized something, that the people did in fact have power, and they exercised it quite successfully in the 60s and 70s. And more importantly, they realized that they couldn't allow that to happen again. So what did they do? Well, the first thing they did was they immediately locked down on education. They withdrew permanent paid positions from school faculties to ensure that teachers, who were largely, in no small part, responsible for organizing the protests that were so famous in the 70s and the 60s, cared more about losing their job than they did about what's right. That's the situation we're in now. And I know from personal experience and my deep, total dissatisfaction with the school system, that it is not, as I said earlier, it is designed to turn out mindless drones who don't know jack shit about anything worth knowing anything about. It's not about practical skills. It's not about, knowing your history so you don't repeat it. It's about fitting everybody into a square hole. And if they don't like a square hole, well then fuck you. We're going to beat you over the head until you agree. Or you're just going to be a reject from the system. And CBC, by the way, did a really good expose on the extreme violence within that is deliberately perpetuated and allowed to exist within the Canadian school system. I highly suggest you look it up. CBC Marketplace, school violence. Look it up. You will be in tears. Assuming you're not just completely dead to that sort of stuff by this point, which a lot of people probably are. Which is by itself another reason. Now, yeah, like I said, capitalism isn't going to survive this. Or if it does survive this, it will be in a very watered down format. It'll be much more the capitalism that was supposed to be, that we were all sold on, as opposed to the total control by the ruling elite type of capitalism that we've really gotten. The one where votes actually matter. And by votes, I mean like 90% population, not the 10% population votes. And the Electoral College will be a thing of the past. The Electoral College is responsible. They're the guys who really, they're the people who really, they're the wealthy capitalist elite. They're the people who really elect the President of the United States. If you haven't been paying attention to your politics for the last, I don't even know how long, but it's been decades at least. Yeah, the Electoral College is not a new institution. The big mistake, the really one fundamental mistake the capitalists made was, and it was this. They made the mistake of thinking that they could blazingly take advantage of the situation that was created by COVID, institute the lockdown, which was, in all due essentiality, starting to look more and more like it was way beyond what was necessary. And it was just being used to generate an aura of fear of the unknown to keep people occupied, because that's the oldest trick in the book. You want to control people, have them afraid of something. Something invisible something invisible. Something over there. Another country. A regime in another country. You know, Assad, evil. You know, this evil regime in this evil country. I mean, countries aren't fucking evil. Okay? People and groups within countries may sometimes, yes, be justifiably characterized as evil. And I'm looking at you, Donald J. Trump, Donald Trump, and anybody really like you, for that matter, who thinks that it's totally alright to fire a bunch of flashbangs into a crowd simply so you can walk to a church. By the way, I applaud the bishop of that church for speaking out against Trump and that PR stunt. And the way he cleared the road to that PR stunt by, by flash bombing and tear gassing and rubber bulleting a bunch of people who were literally just standing there. They weren't doing anything. They weren't breaking any goddamn laws. And quite frankly, as far as I can tell, that was it. That was it. Up until that point, Trump just barely might have been able to salvage something from this mess. That was it. That moment was when everybody was like, yeah, it's unconstitutional what he's doing. The Secretary of Defense, both the former one that Trump fired because the guy actually had morality, and the current one, who Trump is probably going to fire because he was forced to recant certain objectionable things he said. The guy's a fucking coward. He was lying. He was caught in a lie on live television, and he was called upon on it. So by the end of this, Trump is going to have gone through at least 2 secretaries of defense secretaries. One of whom was a good man. The first one. He was a man who 4-star Marine Corps general, I think you all know who I'm talking about, the Mad Dog, as Trump so cleverly called him. And frankly, Mad Dog sounds pretty damn badass. So, you know, sometimes you think you're being really clever, and Trump always seems to think he's being really clever, and all you do is make the people that love you so much love you all the more by being exactly what they've expected from you, which is being an ass, being an idiot, being somebody who cannot understand that the wind has totally, utterly turned against them, and that they're fucked. I'm going to say that again. President Trump and his cronies are fucked. And this is why. Because he is totally blind to the consequences of his own actions. Everything he says is divisive and hateful and spiteful. Everything he says, everything he tweets, every word out of his mouth. And plus, on top of that, he's got really crap grammar. Like, have you seen the way he spells and talks? The guy's got, like... I mean, I cannot understand how so many presidents have got such a poor grasp of the basics of the English language. And Trump's just the latest example of that. But, you know, which should say something about the people that are allowed to be elected, but whatever. You know, the point is Trump acts like a hillbilly. And no offense to the hillbillies out there, who are decent people. But, you know, Trump acts like the stereotypical hillbilly. He rages and froths at the mouth whenever anything doesn't go exactly the way he thought in his delusional mind that it should. And when the military inevitably refuses to attack, or at least people within the military inevitably refuse to go along with this insanity any longer, and they already are. He's been called out by a 4-star general, former defense secretary. By the way, that guy, Mad Dog Madison, got fired by President Obama too. So President Obama is doing a lot of virtue signaling right now, but he's got plenty to answer for as well. And well, so do most of the vast majority of the presidents of the United States of America. You know, but Trump's just the most obvious one. I like to compare Obama to our Trudeau. He was just better. He was just the better looking president. He was the one that was able to convince people that he was all right because he just looked better and actually knew how to speak English, you know, and didn't sound like a total hick hillbilly. He didn't look like a total hick hillbilly and didn't act like a total hick hillbilly. Now, if they'd stayed with a guy like that, they might have been able to fool the people for a few decades longer, but they didn't. Instead, they went with Trump, which should tell you something about the intelligence of the people who thought that Trump would not fuck everything up for them. Capitalism lost out the moment that they elected Trump. And then COVID-19 came along. And COVID-19 was like... the explosives were all there. All it needed was a match. COVID-19 was the match. COVID-19... it's like a nuclear bomb, the way a nuclear fission device operates. It's a bunch of nuclear material that is crushed until the atoms that are splitting off can no longer avoid each other, and then you get a massive fucking explosion. Well, that is exactly what COVID-19 was. It was the crush. And now, the results are the nuclear explosion. And the nuclear explosion is going to be the end, or at the very least, the near complete total destruction of the capitalist system. Because people have been shown very clearly that they can take back the streets, that they can stand up to the heavily armed, militarized, brutal police forces, that there are people within those police forces who have stood with them, kneeled with them. Even in front of the White House. It's fucking happened. It's happening. It's on YouTube. Go check it out if you don't believe me. It's all over YouTube, Twitter, wherever. Now, Something else about COVID-19. Broken promises. And I'm talking specifically Canada here, because the United States always breaks promises. But Canada specifically here has a major problem with COVID-19 and broken promises. Trudeau's an asshole. Okay? He's an elitist prick who has never done a single thing to earn his position in life. It's that simple. I think he mostly rode in on the coattails of his father, Trudeau, the one that people tend to remember for cracking down on the FLQ and not taking their nonsense. Now, a lot of people say they overreacted, including, ironically enough, the RCMP at the time, which is a very ironic statement considering that the RCMP have basically been the stormtroopers of the under the federal control, who have been sicked on Canadians who didn't agree with the federal level, and this is nothing new either. The RCMP has been engaged in a lot of scandals, and very recently the total mishandling of the Nova Scotia shooting. The RCMP are up to past their necks in shit on that one. There have been so many. The RCMP could have stopped it before it ever happened. The gunman, the man who killed, was allowed to kill 26 people, was well known to be an abusive asshole with a shit ton of firearms. Illegal, unlicensed firearms on his property. People knew about this shit. Okay? They knew. He had the entire neighborhood where he lived absolutely fucking terrified of him, because he openly displays firearms. His, once again, illegal firearms. These were not legally obtained firearms with a permit or anything. They were just completely legal. And I'm not talking post-Trudeau virtual signal gun ban 2020. I'm talking before that, under the pre-existing, already perfectly adequate Canadian gun control laws. Alright? That was just Trudeau virtue signaling. And if anybody believes differently, they should really look up the videos dissecting that on YouTube. There's plenty of them. Just go looking up. I'm not going to explain it for you. But yeah, so Trudeau and the RCMP have been working hand in hand. And it's become obvious to anybody paying the smallest bit of attention that the RCMP, and, well, the police in general, but the RCMP especially, have been essentially turning into a very United States-like. They have developed a very U.S. Style attitude of we can arrest anybody and beat them up and whatever, whenever we want, and suffer zero consequences for it. Just like yesterday, a black guy was arrested and brutally arrested in Quebec for no reason. They grabbed the guy by the hair and yanked him down onto the ground. Last time I checked, that's not in the manual of how to how to detain somebody. It didn't help the fact that this guy was black, but the point remains that excessive force is excessive force. If you're going to use excessive force, it doesn't matter who you're using it on. You're using excessive fucking force. You don't need to drag the guy's by the hair, especially when you've got him surrounded. And the guy was surrounded. He had nowhere to run. What was he going to do? Regardless of what he had done or hadn't done, and by the way, what you've done has to be proven, You're presumed innocent until proven otherwise? Is that suddenly not a thing? Or has it just always been a lie? Because as far as I can tell, history goes back pretty far on that one too. And the answer is usually, you're innocent until proven guilty, until the government decides that you're just innocent, that you're just guilty because it's convenient for them, for you to be. If anybody needs proof of that, like I said, there's plenty of history. Google it. Assuming, of course, Google even exists after this, because they've been engaging in they're some of the worst perps in this whole mess. Google has been blatantly using, so that's something else. Google and their favorite patsy, YouTube, have been they have been censoring people. They have been blanket deleting entire accounts. Deleting somebody's Google account is deleting everything on that account. Everything. All your emails, all your history, anything you got stored on Google Docs, the cloud, whatever. So basically, you just fuck somebody's life completely by deleting their account. And there was like an absolutely outrageous mass ban and deletion of Google accounts. Like hundreds of people were deleted. Forget what exactly it was over, but it's on YouTube. Like I said, you can find it. And oh yeah, apparently people were using too many emojis in a live YouTube video. And yeah, they literally first they deleted the people's accounts on YouTube, then they deleted them entirely from the web itself on Google, which is pretty fracking extreme. And there was no reason given, nor was it obviously felt that they needed to give a reason. They're all powerful. They're Google. Fuck you. So that's something else that's got to go. This absolute total control that corps like Google have over the internet. It's got to go. And I don't agree with Trump on anything he's ever said, except, ironically enough, this one specific thing. When he was talking about the political partisanship of Twitter and YouTube and Google and Facebook, who cherry pick the people that they allow to go unmolested and cherry pick the people that they ban, usually for no reason and with no recourse. Ironically enough, I think it's hilarious that happened just right before the total dumpster fire that we currently have. But that's what you call one of history's big ironies. But I do agree with Trump on that one very specific point. And so do a lot of other people who don't agree with Trump on anything else. Once again, look it up on YouTube. Twitter, YouTube, Google, Facebook have had that one coming for a while. And whoever replaces Trump, they should go through on that one, if nothing else. Because these companies, these internet companies, have been operating with complete and absolute impunity, banning whoever, for whatever, at any time, for any reason, just because. So that's got to stop. That's got to stop. If you're not going to use your impunity, your political, your impunity, that the 2020 I forget what the name of the thing was. It's on YouTube, but just look it up. But the neutrality thing that says that internet providers cannot be held liable for what people post on their websites, because if they were, then they would have to minutely in fine detail go through everything, and nobody can do that. There isn't the computing power in the world to do that. Literally, it cannot be done. So that's why the law was made. The law was made that you cannot hold
unless it's something particularly heinous. That you cannot hold the company responsible for what other people that are just using their platform post on there. But it goes both ways. That also means you can't cherry pick what you allow and what you don't allow. You have to be neutral. Unless it's based upon, unless you get like an actual complaint backed up by facts, and not just because somebody didn't like your video or your opinion or whatever. Now, I may not like your video or your opinion, but unless it's really nasty, I'm also not going to report it. I only report people who are particularly vicious bastards. So, and I have done that. I will admit, I have done that. Very few times, but I have. These are the kind of people who add absolutely nothing to a conversation other than bile, malice, that type of stuff. Basically the kind of stuff that Trump would post. What I say is true because reasons, that kind of logic. And then when you say, well, that's not good enough, and they start cursing and swearing, that kind of shit. That's the kind of stuff I report. And even then, most of the time I don't. Because I don't want to give YouTube any excuses. Which it doesn't need more of. So, yeah. The new normal, as I see it, capitalism will be gone, or will be so fundamentally restructured it won't be capitalism. So either way you look at it, it's finished. Unless an incredibly unlikely reversal happens, it's not going to survive. It's gone. The rule of the financial elite is finished. It's had its day in the sun, or rather, it's had its day out of the public view. And the big mistake that the capitalists made, was they were so secure in their belief in their own impunity, their own ability to do whatever the hell they wanted, and piss off as many people as possible, and that nothing would ever happen to them, because so far it hadn't happened to them. I mean, occasionally they get sued or something like that, but so what? They can lose a few $1 million. They've got way more, and that about. That's not counting all the unknown amount of taxes they've got squirreled away in Swiss bank accounts or in the Caribbean or wherever that the government can't even touch. Like when people say, tax the rich. Well, you can't tax them because most of their money isn't even in the country. It's in places where where it can't be touched and therefore it can't be taxed. So these are the kind of people that have all the power in the country. They won't even allow their income to be taxed, because how do you think they got those massive amounts of money in the first place? By not being able to be taxed. They wrote the laws, they wrote the book, and up until now, the chess game has basically been theirs. But this whole COVID crisis, it took the chessboard that they were playing with. It took the loaded chessboard they were playing with, the loaded dice they were playing with, the fixed poker deck that they were playing with, and it just flipped it completely over. It scattered the pieces, it flipped it over, and when you flip that chessboard over, you get a really ugly image of total dictatorship and authoritarianism. And that's what Trump has done. He has become the very visible poster boy for this is what capitalism is. Maximum force response to every little thing. Blatant racism within government departments. Blatant disregard for the welfare and well-being of the vast majority of the population. Basically anybody who can't pay for it. Anybody who can't cover the exorbitant, insane costs of healthcare.
because you have to make a choice between eating or doing your medical bills. And most people are going to choose, well, the next meal because survival. But that's all it is. It's surviving is not living. And I think despite the number of deaths that have occurred because of COVID and the horrific mishandling of it, which I don't believe for a second was not deliberate, by the way. COVID was not engineered. I don't believe for a second. I don't believe COVID was engineered. Who knows? I might be proven wrong about that sometime later. I'm not ruling out the possibility. I mean, I wouldn't put anything past these people because they've done shit in the past, like just as bad, like the original Great Depression was, if not engineered, then definitely helped along by, wait for it, the elite ruling class. And I think that they were trying to get away with the same thing again with this COVID crisis, the massive economic slump that was guaranteed to happen afterwards. So many people would be dead, destitute, and completely and utterly dependent on government financial aid for everything, that they would be completely under their thumb. And because Trump's a fucking idiot, it backfired and completely exploded like a nuke in their faces. So, checkmate, motherfuckers. Checkmate. It is really that simple. I don't know another way to put it. And my heart goes out to every single person out there protesting. And every single person supporting them. And every single person who's had to put up with 200 years of this bullshit and suffered 200 years of this crap. Hashtag I Can't Breathe will change the world forever and for the better. Because the capitalists now know that they can't get away with anything they want. The people now know that they've got people power. They have clearly shown what they can do when you piss them off. What do they do when you piss them off? You go too far? Well, we've all seen what's going on in the streets of every single state in the US and in Canada and around the world. The whole world literally is protesting this thing. It's fucking fantastic. It's like a wet dream for somebody like me. I don't envy the guys in the front line being shot at by the cops. But every single rubber bullet, every single less lethal weapon, every single beatdown, extrajudicial arrest, execution, whatever, performed by the police and the fucking military, if you bastards get involved in this shit. If you support Trump over the people that you swore an oath when you signed up in the military. You swore an oath, especially the officers. I know, I've been doing my research. It's there in black and white. What Trump is doing is illegal under the Constitution of the fucking United States. Not that it's ever stopped the President of the United States before, but that's because they haven't been they haven't driven it to the point where it's like anybody who can see, and literally anybody who looks outside their front window and sees what's going on can see that this is wrong on the most fundamental level. This is not a anti-government assholes convention. This is a we're sick and tired of this shit convention. Okay? That's what this is. And when your business gets smashed up or your car gets lit on fire, as happens in these things, and if you're one of the people who think that that's what the protests are about, violence and torching stuff, well,
I don't know what universe you're living in, but it's clearly not the same one as the rest of us. Yes, your car got messed up. That's sad. Yes, your business may have had a few windows broken or whatever, been burned to the ground, in which case I'm genuinely sorry for your loss. It's not a small thing to lose that kind of thing. But what's more important? Your business being smashed up, your car being wrecked, or the poor bastards in the street taking rubber bullets, tear gas, who can't breathe because an endemically racist system, superiorist system built on the back of slave labor and oppression of the working classes decides that your freedom can be taken away whenever they feel like it. And if you don't like that, then they can execute you, shoot at you, and beat the shit out of you and send you to the hospital with broken bones, or choke the life out of you over 9 minutes on live camera and get away with it. I think the answer should be obvious. If you care more about your property or your car or whatever, then you're clearly one of them. Because no human being with a soul could possibly think that their car or their inanimate property that you cannot bring, is more important than the human lives which are being ruined. Bodies that are being broken, people that are being crippled because a few powerful people will do anything to stay in power. Use any amount of force to stay in power. Will mobilize an, up until this point, secret police force with no uniforms, no identifying markings, no accountability at all to anybody except one man. One man! You know what they call that? That's called political police. When one high-ranking individual within the political party controls such a massive armed force, you're not dealing with democracy. You're dealing with fucking Nazis, pal. And as my parting gift to every single person who's taken a rubber bullet, who has lost a loved one, who may be crippled for life because of this, who's been injured, beaten up, stood up, done anything at all to support the cause of these people who are bravely taking rubber bullets and mace and punches and whatever really that can be thrown at them, you know, and doing it without resorting to violence, because that is exactly what these pieces of shit want. They want violence, because that will then justify their violence. That's the whole point of the peaceful protest thing. If you're violent, it gives them an excuse. It makes you look like the perpetrators, even if it's a completely rational reaction to an insane situation, which is... So yeah. It may be a long, very painful road, but the only way to win a war like this, and it is a war, make no mistake, is to not give the authoritarian bastards what they want, and what they want is an excuse to crack down harder, legally. Not that they care about the law, obviously, but, you know, every little bit helps. So, my heart goes out to all of you beautiful, brave, lovely people who I see on Twitter posts and feeds and what have you. The ones I haven't heard about, the ones I probably will never hear about. My heart goes out to every single one of you. All the people who've lost a loved one to the callous police. All the people who've lost, who died in every single protest for the basic dignity and rights of human beings in history. This is your moment of vindication. This is where all of it pays off. Just keep it up. Keep it up. Keep pushing. Stay nonviolent.
Don't give them any moral or legal pretext to stand on, and you will win. This thing is already in the bag. You just gotta keep up the pressure. Because the capitalists don't know how to deal with defiance. They can't stand. They literally have no idea how to respond with defiance in any other way except brutality. So, basically nothing's changed since the plantations. Slaves have always been treated the same way. If you revolt, they beat you up. If that's not sufficient, they kill you. If that's not sufficient, then they start destroying your homes, your property, killing your family, whatever it takes. Once again, I'm talking Nazi Germany here, also the Soviet Union during its worst periods, and many other governments and places throughout history. There have been many repressive regimes throughout history, and not one single part of the world, not one single people in the world are completely blameless. We have, all of us, at some point in the past, distant or not so distant, done horrible, horrible shit to stay in power, or allowed horrible, horrible things to be done in the name of staying in power. I'm not just talking about Imperial Rome here. I'm not just talking about Trump. I'm not just talking about Nazis or Soviets or China or whatever. I'm talking about everybody. Every government. Ever. Because power only knows one way to respond to people saying, no, we won't take it anymore. And that's, well, if you won't take it, if you won't take my commands, you'll take my sword. I'm pretty sure I made that one up. That might have been said by somebody at some point in the distant past. If it was, I don't care. So yeah. All of you, go out there and be mad dogs. Because that's a badass nickname to go by. Definitely worse ones. Let's hope that we all learn from this and don't allow our governments to ever do this to us ever again. And next time we won't need 50 states and protests around the world. Next time we'll just need somebody saying, that's not right, and that will be the end of it. That's what should be the hope. Jean-Luc Martel, Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Out.